Hi, welcome back to the Huffington Post live stage here at Advertising Week. I'm Katie Kempner, and this is another episode of Perspectives Live, where I interview remarkable working women balancing busy lives. If you would like to see some of my other episodes, you can go to www.katiekempner-perspectives.com. So I'm very excited to be talking with Melissa Barnes from Twitter. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So, and I didn't say your title.
Yes.
The head of brand and agency advocacy.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you do in your position?
Yeah, so my team is really focused on broader education. So we certainly talk about brand building, but we talk about corporate reputation, crisis, issues management, customer service, all these bigger things. And we tend to spend most of our time with folks at the executive level. So I'm working with CMOs because not just because of Twitter, but marketing in general. They're restructuring their teams. There's a new fluidity that's required. Creative and media need to work more closely together. They're rethinking how they work with external partners like agencies. They're sort of pushing through change management in their org to help people rethink how they think. And so we found that when we help them answer those questions, that actually they do better things on Twitter that are more strategic, and they're better set up to be successful on Twitter.
Well, what are some of the best ways to use Twitter if you're a business person?
Yeah, so do a lot of work with folks in actually just onboarding them onto Twitter. So to understand how to use this from a marketing perspective, you actually have to play with it as a human being first. And so that's where it started, but I'd say in the last year and a half, we've seen a lot of executives join Twitter because they see it as an opportunity for thought leadership, corporate reputation. All the media are on Twitter. They're using it to source stories, they're using it to tell stories. So you think about being present there from that perspective. Executives are using it to build relationships with those media. They're also using it to influence analysts who are looking closely at the conversation and then the stories that travel on the platform. And then I think what's interesting is that we've seen a lot of executives use Twitter to bring their teams closer to them. And so an example I love to talk about is Antonio Lucio at Visa and Kevin Burke at Visa. Antonio's the chief brand officer, Kevin's the CMO. And both of them use Twitter to sort of talk about business and marketing initiatives that they think are interesting, that other companies are doing or that they're doing. They use it to highlight great teams in their work. They use it to talk about things that they're passionate about. So Kevin actually will share vines of his travels. Antonio is the father of 5 daughters, and so he's very passionate about sharing stories about women in the workplace and how they can be more successful. And so there's this humanizing factor that comes into play, and when you are the head of this organization of thousands of people, that can be really powerful and inspiring, I think, to their team members.
Yeah. So how do you use Twitter?
Oh gosh, I mean, primarily for me, the value is all the information I consume. So I'm a media junkie, and so I, certainly follow marketing and what's going on in that space, but I love politics, I love travel, I love photography, I love weird, strange things that I would not find or discover in other ways. And so for me, the primary value is first as a consumer. And 40% of the people on Twitter just read. They're not actually actively tweeting. But then there's the other 60% that tweet. And so often if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I'm talking about interesting things that I'm hearing from people I'm meeting with. So I cheat. If somebody says something really smart in the room, I'll quote them and I'll give them credit in my tweet. But I sort of rely on those around me to inspire me in terms of what I would talk about. And I'll share stories that I think are interesting. I'll retweet great tweets that I think are good. That kind of stuff.
So there's nothing wrong with doing a lot of retweeting.
No, actually, the people with the most followers on Twitter are people who retweet more often than people who don't. And it's because they're great curators of content, right? They're surfacing the good stuff to the rest of us who follow them. So we're more likely to see something interesting. So retweeting is absolutely okay and is a great sort of like nod that you've said something interesting or entertaining.
You've had a really impressive career. Could you talk a little bit about how you got to where you are right now?
Thank you. I'm halfway there.
You're
I'm not
welcome.
quite there. I think, I actively have sought out to work on the most interesting or complicated things in my world. So if something interesting was going on, I would try to get close to that. Or if I saw somebody really smart, I would try to be in the room with that person and listen. I never thought I would work in social media. I never thought I would work in Twitter. Granted, we've only been around for 7 years, and I've been working longer than that. But I got into this space because I was working at an agency, and we were pitching a piece of business, and based on the consumers we were going after, women 18 to 24, it didn't make sense to promise to put their product in sort of traditional channels. Women in that age group were on their phones, and they were discovering something called Facebook at the time and MySpace, and they were more inspired by their peers than celebrities. And so that led me to sort of look at other channels and rethink what made sense for that brand. And so, Twitter to me is appealing, and partly why I love it so much is that I still have to understand how all those other channels are working. And we still have to pay attention to the behaviors of people on those channels. Twitter just accelerates all of that, makes it work harder. And so I think just actively finding and trying to stay ahead of what's next, where people are going, has also propelled me
in your career.
In my career.
I want to ask you something kind of slightly personal about your career. I mean, you already have done some really terrific things, and you've explained, how you've gotten there. You're very pretty, and you're very young looking. It turns out you're not as young as I thought you were, but I'm not going to say. But do you think, and a lot of very pretty, young-looking women out there, do you think that has been a hindrance to you or made it easier for you?
Yeah.
It's kind of a strange question, but I think it's a valid one.
Okay, so I had a boss when I first started out who quickly saw my strengths. I know I'm good at counseling people. I know I'm best when I'm sort of at 30,000 feet and looking at the broader business story. And so I had a lot of success when put in those situations. But he gave me the advice when I first started, which was that you look very young, you sound very young, you are young, and and he said you're female, and he said, it's going to be very important for you in the first 5 minutes that you meet people that you let them know how smart you are. And he said you don't need to. There's ways to do it, but asking great questions, being well prepared, making great points, being serious. Those are all things that will help sort of, help them understand all that you're bringing to the table. And so I still think about that when I meet people. But I also, I grew up in a family where I was told growing up that I was smart, that I was funny, that I was a kind person. And so those were the values that were impressed upon me as the most valuable things about me. And so that's how I think of myself. And, occasionally you meet people who maybe take you at face value or dismiss you because you look young. And to me, if anything, that's sort of, it's a challenge to just show them that I actually am good at my job. And usually it works out.
That's great advice. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I try to tell her all those things too. Yep. That's how I was brought up.
Right.
So, last question. For people walking around here, starting out in their career or maybe somewhere in the middle, do you have one piece of advice that you could share with them that you try to live your life by? Or no pressure.
I mean, right? One piece of advice, no matter where you are in your career, is I think don't ever be afraid. You should be doing things that scare you. Scenarios are never going to be perfect. And so you might not be in the perfect job right now, but if you're in the space that you're passionate about, if you're close to people who inspire you, I think solutions emerge. Work really hard and be aggressive. Make it happen for yourself by sort of paying attention. And eventually I do think things work out. I don't think there's a career track anymore.
Yeah.
And so prove yourself, be in the space that you're passionate about, and then keep your eyes open and scare yourself.
That's terrific advice.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great talking with you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And thank you so much. Check back in again soon. We have a whole afternoon of terrific perspectives. Bye-bye.